Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on our third Pediatric Vehicular Heat Stroke Academic Stakeholder Workshop. It's fall, welcome. Last time we met was in the summer, and it's good to see all of you participating today. I've got a few things to share. We have a short presentation just to kind of take a look over what's going on so far in 2021. And then just a few guided questions to keep us on track of what we're really trying to do here is really drive forward the messaging and outcomes of this group to be research-based and evidence-based, and making the messaging and everything that we're doing have that background in the data support. So moving on. If you weren't joining us for the last time, I'm Jessica Butterfield. I am a program manager with the National Safety Council. I have had a 20-year career in child passenger safety issues, working in government, state, and a nonprofit. So I've joined in the roadway practice team in National Safety Council. I'm very happy to be a part of this pediatric vehicular heat stroke team. Just to remind you that the purpose of this group is just a little bit different from the other NHTSA supported group in terms of advocacy versus evidence-based and research. We're really trying to make sure that our conversations and our actions are based on the data and using that to drive forward the messaging and outcomes of this group to reduce that. And we're going to talk into that more today. I thought one of our biggest outcomes on this is to work on collaboration and partnerships. And the last two meetings have been a lot of presentation based. So I wanted to give the opportunity for all of us to get to know each other a little bit better. And I didn't know exactly how many people were going to join us today. So I'm like, instead of having the 70 people that were invited all introduce themselves and kind of get lost in the shuffle, thought we'd just take a brief peek at the ones who are joining us today, whose last name, if you're like me, my last name is Butterfield. So I was always one of the first to have to go. And so you get the lucky first straw here to introduce yourself. You just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and any interesting facts you want to share. And then we do have one speaker today, and I'll go into that in a second. And then I like to term it as Zoomtable. It's kind of like a roundtable discussion, but the way my brain works, it's like there's no roundtables in my house, and I don't know about yours, but so just kind of terming this as we're having a Zoomtable discussion. So I don't know if that's been used before. I don't know if I've coined it, but that's what we're going to go with. So hopefully you guys can follow my sense of humor and my brain in our discussions. Just to remind you that the CPS board owns or houses the resources for this group. If you're not able to join in the previous meetings or the ones coming up, all these meetings are being recorded and you can view them again and again at your leisure. Or if you want to be able to go back and look at those for your resource, I wanted to make sure that you had that available to you. So cpsboard.org, and that URL will take you right to the next steps in evidence-based practice. And that's where you'll find the recordings for these meetings. Let's go, PowerPoint. So you'll see that I did a little hacking on our name, and if you're in the academia world, or if you've got the PhD behind your name, you're the FUD, as I used to refer to as, just taking a look at ways to identify ourselves in pediatric vehicular heat stroke academic stakeholders is a mouthful. So it's kind of trying to shorten it to MPVH, ACT stake, kind of thinking at stake. We have a lot of at stake risk available or here that we talk about and trying to reduce that. So you're going to see that. And if you have any feedback for that, feel free to give it to me. but we want to make sure that we're working and connecting with all each other and having that collaboration and partnership. So just asking those, if here today, if your last name starts with between A and E, and that's myself included, just to give a little bit about your background, your role, any PVH activities that you have participated or are participating in, and what are your countermeasure interests? What are your what is your background, and what do you want to be involved in? What I have found that just because you've done something doesn't necessarily mean you need to stay there. It is possible to move in different tracks, and sometimes it's fun and exciting to get into something that you're not necessarily have a lot of background in. So do I have a volunteer to go first? Miss Dunn, I know that your last name starts between an A and an E. I'm sorry to pick on you, but you're I see you right behind my name.
Hi, my name is Laura Dunn, and I work in the Office of Occupant Protection at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and I'm the programmatic subject matter expert for pediatric vehicular heat stroke, as well as child passenger safety. So my interest in terms of countermeasures, my experience in terms of countermeasures is those that fall on the behavioral side of the house, in terms of how we can educate and empower parents and caregivers, childcare providers, other folks in the community to get involved in this issue. So that is where I fall here in this group. So nice to see all of you today.
Thank you, Laura, for helping bring us all together. It's me and Laura have had conversations, and I also worked at NHTSA for about 10 years, from 2006 to 2016. We didn't have a lot of crossover, but it's so nice to be able to work with her and NHTSA again in this endeavor. And I love I came from the background of safety defects and really looking at a problem and getting in there and digesting it and looking at and slicing it in so many different ways. And I think a lot of it, what I'm looking at when I see the data applies to PVH, and what's the problem? Is it happening now? And what can we do, and what's the remedy there? And some of that overlaps. So PVH may be new to me in that background, but I see a lot of crossover in how you actually scope and look at the problem. So thank you, Laura. Anyone else who would like to go next? Dr. Diamond.
Okay, as a D, I'll go next. Thank you, Jessica.
Sir.
Hi to everybody, I'm David Diamond. I'm a professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of South Florida. My PhD is in biology with a specialty in the neuropsychology of memory. It's what I've studied all my career. For the past 15 years, I've studied children forgotten in cars. In fact, I've addressed the question, how is it that normal and loving parents can forget their children in cars? I published a paper on this topic in general about catastrophic memory failures, and specifically about the neuropsychology of children forgotten in cars, which I also addressed legal issues on that as well. I've served as an advisor to both prosecutors and defense attorneys. I've served as an expert witness when these parents and caretakers are charged with crimes such as manslaughter and murder. So I've had to explain to juries how it is that parents can forget children in cars and why they should not be incarcerated. So I've participated now for a few years in this program. I participated in some of the panel discussions. And so what I want to do is just share my expertise and memory with the group to do what we can to avoid this from happening again.
Thank you. I know I've seen you present at a Lifesavers, I believe, back a few years ago in Texas. And I think what you bring in terms of being able to explain there's a disconnect there that it's not going to happen to me because I'm a loving parent. And then you go to one of your presentations on how the brain works. And basically, if you have a functioning brain, you have the ability to forget your child. And that was the takeaway I've gotten from your talks that the ones that I've attended at Lifesavers, and appreciate you being part of the group. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else here between an A and a B?
I am. Excuse me. My name is Erin Breen.
Hi,
This is my
Erin.
first meeting. Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure. This meeting meets at the same time as one of our strategic highway safety big groups. So I just popped off of their meeting for the first time to be here on time, because this is something that's really important to me, and it has been for many years. So I live in Las Vegas. You know, we had a month of temperatures this year over 110 degrees for 28 out of 31 days. So we had a brutal summer. Oddly enough, this is the time of year which is the most dangerous for us. It's when the heat dissipates and people relax a little bit about that. And this is when you might be distracted and forget your child. I'm knocking wood here. I've been doing this job for 25 years in traffic safety, and really all different aspects, including child passenger safety, and of course, which led us to the issue of kids in cars. And we passed a law, I don't even know, probably 15 years ago, about it's illegal in the state of Nevada to leave your child unattended in a vehicle if they're under the age of 7, unless they are supervised by someone who is older than age 13. So, you know, it leaves a gap there. And I do a lot of countermeasure programs every year. This year we took the Safe Kids van. I'm on the board for Safe Kids. And we placed it at grocery stores for about 6 weeks. We rotated all around the city, you know, with the thermometer in the window and education on the outside, and showing people just, you know, what the temperature outside is and then what the temperature inside the vehicle is. And so we do events like that throughout the year. I'm knocking wood because we haven't had an incident in our city probably 8 years of a child losing their life because they were left in a vehicle. Sadly, I work with a dad who was that person. And, you know, I mean, he was the quintessential school teacher, tired, last day of school, only teachers had to be there, not students. His routine was broken, and, you know, that's all it takes. I have encountered lots on all different topics, but, you know, especially when you're talking to parents, their first attitude is always, I would never do that. You know, so it's so beneficial to present education on here's how it happened. So this is something that we've worked on several different things, from legislation to how it's reported for the near misses, so to speak. And, you know, we get that data now through police reports. And of course, through EMS, if the child were to be at a stage where they needed medical care, but those near misses are really important as well. And so anytime a police officer rolls and a follow-up is done that includes child protective services in any way, from the police point of view to actual CPS at the county level, we would know about. And then, not that we've had to do this in a long time, but part of the child death review board used to be far too often we reported on these instances, and thankfully we haven't had to do that in a long time.
Thank you, Erin. Do we have anyone else that I'm trying to see on my screen here?
I can go, Jessica. This is Joe Colella.
Thanks, Joe.
I'm not going to turn my camera on. It's a long story, but I'm not going to do that.
No problem. Thanks for being here, Joe.
Sure. I'm the Director of Child Passenger Safety for JPMA. Many of that includes the child restraint manufacturers, and many of our manufacturer members have launched or are working on alert systems that are incorporated into the child restraint. And also we have members that are working on, or at least exhibitors from our past shows who are working on add-on products as well. And that's both here and abroad. I think we're all aware that the requirements for those kind of systems are moving faster on the other side of the Atlantic. And so those are being worked on actively. We also support the expansion of vehicle sensor technologies for the long term here. And not, we really lean in the same direction as many of the other experts in the field, where not necessarily the door sequencing type alert systems, but sensor technologies for the long term. We also collaborate on raising awareness through earned media, through live feeds, and other activities with some of the partners who are on this call. And we include some consumer-friendly information on our website. We also encourage child restraint manufacturer members to actively participate in the national collaborative efforts that we've worked on through the coalition, along with their own efforts. And then separately, externally from JPMA, I'm also just recently joined the Lifesavers Planning Committee, so I'm able to engage with Heatstroke through that. And I'm also working separately as an advisor with Safe Kids. So I'm able to work on their efforts as well.
Thanks, Joe. I know that talked to a few people about some proposals sent to Lifesavers, and maybe later in with, I think the last slide is just any updates, and we can talk about, what's going on in terms of conference abilities and plans of presenting, and Lifesavers is definitely on the list. So thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Anyone else? I think we've had, let's see here. My goal was not to spend the whole hour we have going through introductions, but we have 4. We probably have time for one more if there's anyone else between an A and an E. I'm trying to see.
I can go. So I'm Mark Chandler. I work with the research department at Safe Kids Worldwide, and we're a nonprofit organization that has the mission of preventing unintentional injuries among children through community education and awareness raising. So we have a heavy focus on child passenger safety. So naturally, we have an interest in pediatric heat stroke as well. And as far as our work around pediatric heat stroke, we have a couple of studies that are currently in development. So first, we're working with the National Center for Fatality Review and Prevention to analyze some of the data that they have on heat stroke deaths that were investigated by child death review teams, and then to identify some of those circumstantial and environmental factors that are associated with these incidents. And then we're also in the early stages of planning a study with kids in cars to analyze their national surveillance data. And then again, just looking at trends over time and circumstantial, environmental, and behavioral factors that are associated with heat stroke deaths. And then in terms of countermeasures, we're basically just looking to identify what some of these human factors are that are related to these incidents, and then use that information to educate parents and provide practical tips and guidance that they can use to prevent this from happening. So I'm excited to be here. We definitely have a vested interest in this topic, and I look forward to getting to know each of you more.
Thank you, Mark. Excited to hear about those 2 studies and developing studies. And I think, anything more we can have to promote this group and the cause and reduction of PVH injuries and fatalities through evidence-based information is only going to assist us in driving down these numbers. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, folks, thank you so much. That was great. 5 people. I know some of you have seen some of your names, but it's just great to have the few minutes to really put that all together as we start really diving in this group. So next, before we get into our Zoomtable, I asked Jan Null from San Jose State University. He is an adjunct professor with San Jose State University. He's also the founder of NoHeatstrokeorg, just to give us a little at a glance of what's happening in PVH cases in 2021. We know what is occurring in our world starting in last year with the pandemic and coronavirus, and just a little bit of a preview. And I also, spoke with Jan just a little bit about, relating to what he's going to show into causal factors or what circumstances are behind it. It's too early for that information, but I know how things take time to analyze. But I was just like, so do you know if it's the same or if things have changed? But I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Null here, who's going to just give us a little information of what he's seen so far in 2021.
Thanks, Jessica, and good
You're
afternoon.
welcome. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, and good afternoon, everyone, except those on here in the West Coast where it's still morning. Fortunately, there aren't a lot of numbers to report this year. We're looking at, a year very similar to last year. We're at almost exactly the same spot. You can see that on that graph in the top right there, where I've kind of paralleled that lower trend line. My thinking is still it is related to, a lot of people still working at home and not transporting children to the daycare and other activities, and then them unfortunately being forgotten in vehicles. So, we are in the bottom right there. We're down at the lowest number we have seen. There's still a little bit more time in this year. I'd love for that number to stay exactly where it is. On the map, the one interesting thing to note here is that cluster in North and South Carolina. There's about a 60-mile radius where we have 6 of the 22 documented PVH deaths this year. And we've kind of seen that in the past. I see these clusters. I don't think there's any real relationship there, but from a statistical point of view, that's pretty interesting to have, a little bit over a quarter of the cases within a very small area. So, that's just sort of the brief overview. As Jessica said, I'm still, looking at, the circumstances behind the 22 cases we've had so far this year. Still trying to gather some details of whether to sort those into accidentally forgotten, gained access on their own, or knowingly left in vehicles. So that will be coming up in a future update. And thanks for these couple of minutes. And you all, I think, probably know how to reach me. I'll put a contact stuff in the chat when I'm done here. So thank you very much, Jessica, for inviting me.
Thank you, Jan. I look at this map and it just reminds me of, I was in Office of Defects Investigation looking to see where we were having the airbag issues with exploding airbags. And I just see some semblance of coastal areas that are clustering. Definitely that cluster stood out to me, but from your information, that's pretty standard. I also look at the graph of the years, and I'm like, so what happened in 2015 that we were at 25? Just, because we know that the pandemic and COVID and people staying at home weren't that wasn't going on in 2015 as far as I remember. It seems like this has been lasting forever, right? But anyone else want to have any comments on this preview information for 21? Any comments before we move on?
One thing I'm curious about, Jan, for last year, were all of those deaths when children were able to have access to cars? And I believe they weren't children forgotten in cars. Is that correct?
No, we had the same numbers as usual with the gained access category. We had either 9 or 10, and that's about the average. So where we dropped off, I think by 63%, if I recall the number, was in the forgotten in cars category.
So were any children forgotten in cars last year?
Yes. I think it was on the order of around eight or 10. So about the same number. So yes, there were forgotten in cars.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, now I thought we would move on to our discussion portion, or as cheesy as you may want to call it, the Zoomtable. I think it's great, but you guys can give me your comments on that. But just to, again, review of what we're really trying to do here. And I know a lot of us are involved in different aspects of vehicle safety. And I think the biggest takeaway is that we're not all researchers, and that's okay. We can use our collective backgrounds and strengths, but keeping that research and evidence base back in our head and utilizing that to guide us in what we do here in this group. So really looking at strategic next steps in our prevention efforts, really trying to advance those countermeasures and next steps, and take a look at what's missing in PVH analysis and research and the impact of all the outreach that is going on. I think, for the next few meetings, our next one is, I believe, I'm going to have scheduled in January, looking at quarterly meetings here and trying to break out a little bit into breakout rooms and gather us together in terms of our backgrounds and strengths, and really take a look and delve a little deeper into these topics. But how many of you have used, was this Poll Everywhere? This is something new for me. And I thank Tammy Franks from NSC for helping in her guidance in this. But just wanted to make this a little interactive in our meetings, and this will also help keep track of some of the discussions that we have going on. But for those of you who, I think at the very top of the screen gives us the directions, you can either do it web-based at pollev.com/Jessica Butterfield, just like it sounds, 990 for these screens, or if you're a texter, which I think most of us are, you can text Jessica Butterfield 990 to 22333. And then once you join and you see these screens, it'll let you pick the ABCD. Some of these screens that we'll be going over are open-ended questions. So those will be more typing in versus just picking an ABCD. And this is just to get us used to using this, looking for what educational messaging has been used most. And I set it so you can only choose one. So if you're like, I've seen all of these, some of them may be more prevalent than others, but really trying to see what's been going on this year in terms of what you've seen in terms of outreach and campaigns, whether it was social media, ads on TV, television, radio, paid media, earned media, just which ones have we seen? I had never seen the bag in the back. Had anyone else? That was something I found in my research. That was new to me. I hadn't seen that used in my state. I'm in Michigan, by the way. I was going to say, are we dead even? It doesn't surprise me. The first two are, I think, the most common. Anyone want to speak to how they've seen this? Where have you seen it? the none of the above. So it's meaning that you haven't at all. There's other things going on, I'm aware, and National Heatstroke Month is May. And I believe looking through Jan's website, it seems like the earliest cases start a little before that. So it makes sense that the national month is in May. When we do a lot here in Michigan, when you start hearing the ads, May can be still snowing. So people are like, what is this going on? But realizing that in other parts of the country that we're starting to see them, the earliest of the year start back then. Okay, so it seems like Park Look Lock is, or actually none of the above for the winning team, which I don't know my takeaway from that. Anyone else? Just from a state perspective, anyone want to think why that isn't, why you haven't seen anything this year?
If I could add, Jessica, this is Laura.
Hi, Laura.
It is challenging. Sorry, I'm going to turn my camera on. It is challenging for states to actually do any sort of paid media in terms of heatstroke because they don't have that funding under the 405B grant programming, which some of their funding comes from for child passenger safety efforts, that sort of thing. So I think that's part of it. But there are certainly still opportunities for earned media and donated media and that sort of thing. And those resources are available for people to do. But again, sometimes the struggle I know with our materials is people have a hard time finding them. So that's why we try to promote early and often and connect people exactly where they are on traffic safety marketing. Perspective from the national level.
Yeah, so just the not knowing where to go to, that a lot of these materials are created. Traffic safety marketing is such a great resource. And so maybe some work done on just the knowledge of where to get access to the earned media and everything that is made up for them. Tammy, are you monitoring the chats for me? Is there anything going on? Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yes, I am monitoring it. So this is Tammy Franks with the National Safety Council and the National Child Passenger Safety Board. And I think one thing to think about, Jessica, is a lot of the messaging is done via social media and posting on social media. So, getting it
if you're
out,
not a social media
person, you may not see it, or for the National Child Passenger Safety Board or NHTSA, follow National Child Passenger Safety Board, NHTSA, Safe Kids Worldwide, and we tend to share each other's messaging as well.
That's a really good point. Thank you, Tammy.
Amber did point out that there's a major campaign missing from this, the Kids and Cars Car Safety Look Before You Lock program.
I thought of that too when I was creating these pictures, and I saw the underwear's baby was look before you lock. So didn't know if those were combined or if you look at the graphic of where's baby, it says look before you lock. So I'm definitely familiar with kids and cars. Look before you lock. Thank you, Amber. All right, let's move on to the next one. That was just kind of like a warm up of getting us to use this. And I think most of you were able, we're still changing answers. Here we go. Let's move on. Okay, now I'm just kind of taking a little poll here of in terms of PVH research countermeasure activities. What do you participate in currently or are of interest to you? This will allow you to choose more than one, just so not to say you can only participate in one. But my hope is in the next meeting, get to the reaching out and trying to strategically put us into the different categories and groups here, and then having some crossover and sharing as well. So not to just pinpoint you to one area, and also to think about, a discussion at the very end is does anyone have any ideas of who we're missing in this group, who would be a person to extend the invite. I'm looking, are you involved in communication and media strategies, education and advocacy, which I think a lot of us have that background in, research, academia. I think human factors has a huge role in this. And I know that I really enjoyed working with the human factors group when I was at NHTSA in terms of safety defects and how those were presented in terms of the outreach for recalls and also for the instructions for recalls. I know I looked at quite a bit of that with the team there in terms of child seats. Government relations and policy, I think a few of you are on board for that, and technology. And I think, we're seeing so many different technologies come to fruition here. And one of my thoughts is, how is that going to impact this in terms of the problem? Because, we used to do a lot of education about trunk entrapment, and then trunk release came out and you don't really hear too much about it. And there was a lot of effort on backovers, and then backup cameras have been standard since 2018. So we're seeing technology catch up to the issue at hand. So we have, I think, a lot coming in terms of that. And I know Laurel Glenn, I think she is on the call here today, did a presentation over one of her studies that she did when looking at the different technology. So it seems like we have, I figured we have quite a few: education and advocacy. It's great to see academia, human factors and research. We need to help that in that arena for sure. Government relations and policy, technology, and none of all the above. No one wants to get on all the subgroups, huh? They're like, nope, don't put me there. Try to think if you, at the very end, I have a slide about who may be missing from this group. And feel free to contact me too if we feel like there's someone out there working in one of these arenas that would be a good join to advance our goal of strategic policy in terms of getting PVH deaths down, in terms of looking at the evidence-based studies out there. Sorry, I was distracted by my dog. She's not enjoying what I'm doing right now. All right, moving on. Thank you guys. When we look at the NoHeatstrokeorg, and this is just, I think, a good, and hopefully there's some discussion here, because I don't want you guys to listen to me talk every meeting. I want you guys to have the chance and want to connect with each other. Is I thought, when we take a look at the circumstances or the mechanism of injury, I think, having a term that we're all using for that would be a good next step. But forgotten is one that raises to the top. And I know Dr. Diamond talks a lot in his talk and studies about how it's possible, but we know that from using that information on NoHeatstroke.org, 53% of the cases that we have from back in 2018 to 2021 now, 53% of the cases. And what stands out to me on Jan's website too is 46% of those occurred they were forgotten on their way to preschool or daycare. And 72% of the caregiver classification fell under the mom, the dad, or both. And again, using the information posted on NoHeatstroke.org. So taking a look at the three different causal factors or mechanisms of injury, circumstances, I think maybe which word would land on here? Maybe that's our first next step. But what do you guys think in terms of what you know, what we need to know, what's missing, what is in your thought process on this causal method? And this one, it actually allows you to, it's not an A, B, C, or D. If you could just punch in some information or verbally say it, let's have a conversation. Some people are a little more shy and just like to punch in their information on their computer, but let's talk. I'm seeing some chats.
Hey Jessica, this is Sai Yang from Honda.
Hi, Sai.
Hey, I think there's a lot of data that's missing, at least at this level. You know, there's a lot of statistics. I'm not sure if NoHeatstroke.org has all that information. For example, do they have, you know, information on what type of cars that these children were in, like what make, model, year, those type of
Like
information?
a truck versus a passenger van.
And even just the age of the vehicle.
Oh, or age of vehicle. Okay.
Right. Just, you know, again, also even the parent or the adult demographic when it comes to, you know, things like education level, because if we're trying to tackle it from all levels of you know, all different, I guess, different ways, whether it's education, communication, or technology, I think all that information is required to make a comprehensive action plan. As an automaker, you know, what we can do is apply certain type of technology, but usually those type of technology are only on newer
cars.
Newer cars, right? So if these occurrences are happening in older vehicles, for example, do we need to come up, you know, or another company needs to come up with some kind of, you know, retrofit technology or some kind of, you know, warning different system? Because if we, again, there's all kinds of technology currently in the market that have, you know, they use ultrasonic sensors or different types of high frequency radars, but those have to be integrated within the vehicle. It's not like a plug and play system. It's not a, you know, a system you can just buy off the shelf.
No, it's not an Apple CarPlay, right? You have to.
Right.
You have to actually, I know my vehicle is to 2021, and when I open my rear door, it reminds me to check my back seat. So, but you have to have that vehicle have that.
Exactly. And we have, you know, the passive system, like you mentioned, just the door switch mechanism. That's, I think, as part of AFAI, I think all of most of, I don't know about all of them, many OEMs part of AFAI have agreed to apply the passive door switch technology on, I want to say 2025 model years for all fleet. At least that was part of the agreement. And but again, I think more data and more information from these cases will help us understand how we can tackle this issue.
So really gleaning out of the analysis of these cases, any information, and looking for those trends and looking for what's happening now, and if our interventions are actually going to have an impact based on the information that is showing up in the cases happening. It makes sense.
Yep. That's all I got.
Thank you, Sai, so much.
Yeah, I'm able to address a little bit of Sai's question, and I urge him to reach out to me directly. There is very incomplete data on some of the sorts of demographics and metrics that he's looking for. For example, very seldom in media reports is the model and the year of the car even reported. Sometimes there might be a media photograph, and we can kind of do some guessing from that. But that's not a metric that is real easy to get a hold of. And as most of you know, this data is gathered via media reports, occasionally through a police report, but those are usually if there's any criminal prosecutions, and those are not released until after everything is adjudicated, which can literally be years. So, but if Sai or anyone else wants to reach out, I'd be happy to share some of the other metrics that we do gather.
All right, thanks, Jan. I just wasn't sure if there was like a centralized database for any of this information. NHTSA has like the first database when it comes to compiling police reports on the types of accidents So I don't know if heat stroke information is also recorded in some kind of database, but if it's not, then it would be hard to really dive into these detail.
Yeah. Yeah, let's have a discussion about that.
Hey, Sai, this is Jalaj Maheshwari from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I can agree with John. Recently, we wrapped up a project where we were exploring unique heat stroke cases that occurred in the United States. And the data sources for our study were the media reports as per NoHeatstroke. And then based on those media reports, we actually reached out to some of the police departments to get that specific information that you're asking about. We try to get data on a much granular level, such as the color of the car, the model year of the car, what was the position of the child when he or she was found in the child seat, if they were found in a child seat, and so forth. And like Jan said, most of these police reports are very difficult to get hold of, especially if there's a criminal prosecution that's ongoing. Some of these states also have limitations on public access to those police reports. But from all the data that we've pulled up, we found vehicles as old as 2001 and as recent as 2019 where those incidents have occurred.
Sounds good. I'll probably reach out to you guys separately to see if there's any way to get some more information and help address this problem.
Jessica, perhaps I could just share some of my observations. This is largely anecdotal, but I've been involved in dozens of cases. I've talked with dozens of parents and caretakers. So it's just my impressions. Plus, I've seen a lot of the police reports since I get involved in these cases. I think to reiterate what was in the Washington Post from Gene Weidengarten about a decade ago, this is just a random sample of Americans. You see people in every walk of life, men and women, all kinds of cars. I don't know. My first thought is there isn't much value in looking at the type of car or the color. I have the impression this is just a totally random sample of Americans. So that's one observation. Obviously, these are people who don't have any kind of technology in the car to tell them that there is a child in there, but that's relatively new. When I see 46% on the way to preschool daycare, my impression is that virtually every case I've been involved in, the parent or caretaker was to drop the child off on the way to daycare as they're going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so their routine was they were typically the spouse in general, or on that day of the week, would have driven straight from home to work. And they were supposed to stop that habit memory, that routine, interrupt it to go to daycare, bring the child, and then go to work. I'm actually a little surprised that it's less than half of the cases. Maybe Jan, you could elaborate on this. Now, I do know many cases you have parents or caretakers on their way home, and then when they arrive at home, they've lost awareness of the child. And that can be from anywhere. You do also have people going to church. They're on their way to church. They've lost awareness of a child in the car. They're coming home from church. That does seem to happen with some regularity. People are on their way to a park. They lose awareness of the child. I am also curious, before I forget, you have both. It's interesting. I understand mom or dad. There have been some cases I've been involved in which you have both the mom and the dad in the car. I've never had a case in which both parents forget one child in the car. I have had quite a few cases in which there are numerous children in the car. And it's a bit like the, what was the movie years ago? The parents have a whole bunch of kids to remember, and one child is left behind. And
Home Alone.
Home Alone. Thank you, Jessica.
You're welcome.
So
Pop
I
culture.
have been involved in some cases where you've got numerous kids in the car, everybody in the car, including the children, have lost awareness of the quiet baby sleeping in the car, even if it's the baby's next to someone, and then the baby is left in the car. There is one category also that I've had a few cases that's not here, and that is a miscommunication. You have two parents in the car. One typically would take the child out of the car and bring into the house. That parent gets distracted. The other parent thinks the other parent is taking the child out of the car. They both go into the house doing something else, and then they both think the baby is napping in the bedroom. And meanwhile, the baby is still in the car. So that's a different kind of error, which I would categorize as miscommunication. And I don't know if, Jan, you have followed up on that at all.
You know, a lot of that sort of stuff is not readily available. First of all, as far as, you know, be able to pin it down to, you know, was there miscommunication? Which parent was it? So on NoHeatstroke.org, there's a trends and patterns category where I have a lot of this data, you know, as far as who the responsible parent was. In particular, was it church? Were they going to the park? So a lot of this is parsed out there. So that might be a starting point. And again, we can have a discussion about that, or maybe at a future one of these Zoom meetings, you know, I can walk through some of that data.
Hi, David.
And let me just add one thing. Hi, Amber. And I know Amber and Jeanette, there's a real problem with calling it forgetting children in cars. This is, I think, why the public responds so negatively, because forgetting sounds so trivial. You forget phone numbers, you forget people's names, you don't forget a child in the car. And it's a category that I think makes people respond very strongly with a knee-jerk reaction. You can forget anything, you just don't forget a child. And I think, and what I try to help people to understand is it's not just, they often will say, how do you forget you have a child? And it's not just forgetting you have a child, it's losing awareness of the child in the car. And I think that's a message that I help to get across to people.
So is that what you use, David, when you are talking in your talks, losing awareness versus forgetting?
Well, technically it is forgetting. And the example I give people is, and it's something that's pretty much happened to everybody, is you're on the way home from work and you have every intention to stop at the store to pick up some groceries, and you go right past the store and arrive at home. And then when someone at home says, you know, where's the milk? You don't say, I lost awareness of what I wanted to do. I forgot. So it is forgetting, but it's a different category of forgetting than, for example, forgetting someone's name. So it's losing awareness of a plan to do something in the future. Like if anybody here plans to call someone, when this meeting is over, you want to call someone, right? The meeting is over and you forget to call someone. We're doing a lot of things in which we plan to do something in the future. And it's so easy to lose awareness of that plan. So when you put your child in a car seat, you've got a plan. I'm going to daycare. I will bring my child to daycare. Then I will continue on my journey. You lose awareness of that plan because you've got a quiet child in the back, and your habit system, your autopilot system takes over and takes you to the normal destination, which typically is not daycare.
Thank you. I think you bring up a really interesting point about how the messaging is getting out to parents. And it's just a thought, and it's just a definitely thing that we can dive into more, is the word forget, even though it actually does apply here. Is it the reason or a factor in the reason why the messaging doesn't get through the front door, because they're closing you off? Because I would never forget my child. If the word forget can be finessed, or it's usually a marketing problem, right? And I'm not saying that PVH is, you know, something we're trying to sell, or PVH prevention, but if the terminology being used as a category has an impact on how the message is not even opened, the present isn't even opened, because though the messaging and the packaging just doesn't fit the perception. That's an interesting and I think worthy area for a group of us to really look at.
Yeah, and that's actually why my hand was up too, Jessica, is the same question is, I'm wondering if there's any research that's already available, focus group research with parents, because no matter what data we collect, we were talking about collecting different levels of data earlier, no matter what data we collect, if we're not presenting it in a way that parents are going to respond to,
doesn't matter.
We had that conversation at a Heatstroke Coalition meeting where we talked about using unknowingly left as opposed to forgotten. And there are other terms as well, but the one that resonates the best with parents is the one that we should be using.
Let me suggest that the proper word is forgetting. Anything else you use is just kind of hemming and hawing and trying to come up with something that just isn't appropriate. But the problem is there are different categories of forgetting. To forget that you have a plan to call someone when this meeting is over is very different from forgetting someone's name.
Yeah, the outcome is totally different.
And the outcome is so different. And we all recognize how easy it is to forget a plan. That's why we have planners. That's why we put reminders in. We have alarms on our phone to tell us about doctor's appointments and things we want to do. In the article, I have an online article in which I have a sticky note on my steering wheel that says, stop at the store to pick up milk. Because I know that, I would just drive right by the store, and that's a different category of forgetting. I also want to emphasize there are catastrophic forms of forgetting that are documented. Pilots forget to set the flaps on their wings and planes crash. Air traffic controllers forget about a plane and then planes potentially crash. And so there are catastrophic outcomes from this kind of category error, which I documented in the paper that I published.
Thank you again, Dr. Diamond. And I hate to push us along because we're actually really getting some good, solid conversation, meaningful conversation, if you will, going here. And I might reach out, and before our next meeting, I have plans to actually reach out to a few of you to see, some work behind the scenes. But our next meeting will be in January, and my next slide says that. But I want to be respectful of your time, and I know we're at the end. There's a few, the other categories we did not get to in terms of, mechanism of injury, the knowingly left, which a lot of work has not been done on. Because I think that's even a different one to tackle in terms of, how that word means. It doesn't necessarily mean that they were purposely seeking malice towards their child. It was they left them in the car to go on an errand, bring groceries in, to go get their hair cut, to keep their child safe. So knowingly left and then gained access to. So we'll bring that up again in January. But for those of you who have to off, please do. Thank you so much for being here. I just have this last one up. If anyone wants to throw in any updates on what they're doing, plans, ideas, some collaboration or partnership sparks that came through this meeting. I saw just a little bit in the background, just being like, oh, I'm going to contact you and we're going to keep working together. This is exactly what we're here for, to make those meaningful conversations go somewhere. So please feel free. I'm going to hang out for a few more minutes, and then I'll go back to this slide. I just want to let you know, I'll be sending out the invitation for the next meeting sooner than later, so you have it in your calendar. But our target is the first Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, and the next one would be January 6th, just to give you a heads up there. And my email is on the very bottom there. But also remember that this video is being—
It should be 2022, shouldn't it?
Oh, yes, you are correct, sir. Thanks, Uwe. Almost got through with no errors, right? Almost got through if I wouldn't have gone to this one. Thank you. January 6th, 2022. And for those of you who still write checks, it's something that we constantly do. And there's the memory thing, Dr. Diamond. Just habit, creature of habit, and just kept going there. But thank you so much all. And there's my contact information. Please reach out to me. I think we have some work out in front of us, and I think we have a lot of potential. And I thank you so much for being part of today. I'm going to stop recording, and those of you who need to jump off, please do. And those, if you want to stick around a little bit, I have a little bit of time. Let's